Imagine a family where even your toaster, socks, and puddle reflections come with strict rules. This isn't just don't run with scissors. It's a world where bread has a soul, doorbells judge your every move, and missing a step could summon chaos. We've collected 101 of the weirdest family rules ever passed down. And trust me, some of them will make you question reality. Ready to see what insanity looks like in everyday life? 1. In one family, you were absolutely forbidden from singing at the dinner table because it summons the ghosts of your tone-deaf ancestors to come and judge you. It basically turns a simple meal into a haunted episode of American Idol, where the only prize is avoiding eternal disappointment from your great-great-aunt Mildred. What song do you think would be risky enough to get you permanently haunted? 2. This family operated on a strict 3-square toilet paper rule. If you needed more, you had to exit the bathroom and formally petition the Council of Elders, usually just mom and dad on the couch, explaining in detail why your situation required extra resources. It's the only household I know where you needed a lawyer for a bathroom break. 3. The rule was simple. You must always leave a house through the same door you entered. Using a different exit would supposedly throw the family's cosmic balance out of whack, leading to a week of minor inconveniences like burnt toast and lost car keys. It was like they were living in a video game with a really weird glitch. 4. Bare feet were considered an open invitation for disaster. Socks were mandatory at all times inside the house. Why? To protect you from the carpet goblins, tiny invisible creatures that would supposedly tie your shoelaces together later. It's a surprisingly specific threat, but hey, at least they weren't ankle biters. 5. The television remote control wasn't just a device, it was a monarch. It had a designated velvet coaster on the coffee table, and if you left it on the couch, you'd get a 10-minute lecture on respecting the hierarchy of the living room. Can you imagine explaining this to a first-time guest? 6. Every time the family car passed a cemetery, everyone had to lift their feet off the floor of the car. If your feet were down, the spirits of the dead would grab your ankles and drag your soul 6 feet under. It resulted in some very awkward mid-air leg cramps during long road trips. 7. This family's toaster had diagnosed performance anxiety. You were not allowed to look at it while it was toasting because direct eye contact made it nervous, and it would burn the bread out of sheer panic. You had to give it space and privacy like it was a shy, temperamental artist. What's the weirdest rule your family has? Drop it in the comments below. 8. If you spilled salt, the remedy was instant and bizarre. You had to scoop up a pinch and place it on the head of the youngest person at the table to absorb the bad luck. Growing up as the youngest in that house meant you were basically a walking, talking good luck charm that frequently smelled like salt. 9. Whistling indoors after sunset was strictly prohibited. The family believed whistling was the universal frequency for summoning mischievous spirits, essentially sending them a "you up?" text message at 2 in the morning. So every cheerful night whistler was treated like an amateur ghost hunter, playing with forces they couldn't comprehend. 10. A sneeze in this household launched a full-scale emergency protocol. First, a mandatory "God bless you." Then, everyone in the room had to immediately knock on wood 3 times. This 2-step system was apparently the only thing stopping your soul from rocketing out of your body and being snatched by a passing demon. 11. The heel of a loaf of bread was treated with the reverence of a holy relic. It was the guardian of freshness, and eating it before the rest of the loaf was gone was a cardinal sin. Doing so would break a sacred pact with the bread spirits, causing them to curse your home with eternally stale carbs as punishment for your betrayal. 12. Vacuuming on a Sunday was strictly forbidden. Not because of noise, but because it would supposedly anger the dust goblins, who would retaliate by hiding one of every pair of socks in the house for the entire next week. The father treated the vacuum cleaner on Sunday like it was a loaded weapon with the safety off. 13. Inside their house, the word pig was treated like a forbidden curse from a dark magic spellbook. They were convinced saying it would magically summon chaos and messes. If a kid said it and then someone spilled juice, the mother would give this terrifyingly calm "I told you so" look, as if she had just witnessed a prophecy unfold. 14. Giving shoes as a gift was considered a declaration of war on a relationship. The superstition said the recipient would use those exact shoes to walk out of your life, So gift-giving involved a ridiculous workaround where you'd hand them the shoes, and they had to sell them back to you for a quarter to exploit a supernatural loophole. 15. You were never, ever allowed to point at a rainbow. It was a direct and personal insult to the sky painters, who would immediately retract their masterpiece in disgust. The family believed the sky would then personally hold a grudge against you, targeting you with bird droppings for the rest of the day. 16. The family had a single, plush armchair that no living person was ever allowed to sit in. It wasn't an antique. It was Grandpa Theodore's ghost chair. They would fluff its pillow daily and sometimes ask its opinion on the weather. It wasn't a chair. It was an invisible, freeloading family member with the best seat in the house. 17. On your birthday, the very first thing you consumed had to be sweet to ensure a sweet year. One year, the son woke up and drank a glass of water first, and his mom nearly had a meltdown, convinced she'd have to perform a bitterness exorcism. Imagine you're forced to live by one of these rules for a year. Which one breaks your sanity first? Tell me everything in the comments. 18. An itchy left palm meant money was coming. But an itchy right palm? Financial apocalypse. The family would immediately go into code red lockdown, hiding wallets, changing online shopping passwords to unguessable gibberish, and treating every ringing phone like a debt collector until the itching stopped. It was a full-blown recession triggered by dry skin. 19. Serving milk and fish at the same meal was a terrifying taboo. The grandmother claimed the combination would create a spiritual civil war in your stomach between the spirit of the cow and the ghost of the fish. This cosmic indigestion would make your soul so slippery you'd just slide right out of your body in your sleep. 20. No laundry could be done on New Year's Day for fear of washing a family member out of your life. This led to the annual tradition of the family sitting around awkwardly in their slightly sticky, confetti-covered party clothes, staring at a mountain of laundry like it was a ticking time bomb they couldn't defuse until midnight. 21. During a thunderstorm, all mirrors had to be covered with blankets. They believed lightning could use mirrors as a portal to take a soul selfie of you, trapping your reflection in the spirit world forever. And apparently, the Wi-Fi in the afterlife is terrible, so you'd be buffering for eternity. 22. You were physically incapable of just accepting a compliment. It was a 3-act play of denial. If you skipped the performance and just said thank you, you were seen as arrogant and cursed with hubris, and the family would watch you for weeks, waiting for your inevitable, dramatic downfall. 23. Every new houseplant had to be taken on a formal welcome tour and introduced by name to all the other plants. The father insisted this was crucial for inner plant diplomacy and preventing a silent, leafy rebellion in the living room. They treated their ficus like a foreign dignitary. 24. At night, all shoes had to be pointed towards the nearest exit. This wasn't for tidiness. It was a soul fire drill. If your shoes were pointed the wrong way, your escaping soul would get confused by the bad spiritual feng shui and just run into a wall instead of floating to safety. 25. Eggs were only permitted on days of the week containing the letter S. Mondays and Fridays were known in the house as the Great Egg Famine. The sheer amount of breakfast-related despair that happened twice a week was astronomical, all for a reason lost to time. And if you think that's insane, you have no idea what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button because things are about to get even weirder. 26. Wearing stripes and plaid at the same time was considered a declaration of war against the universe. It wasn't a fashion faux pas. It was an act of pattern chaos that would supposedly short-circuit the cosmic balance of the entire house, causing light bulbs to flicker and spoons to mysteriously bend in their drawers. 27. Pizza had to be eaten crust first, no exceptions. This was a sign of ultimate respect for the pizza's structural integrity. Eating it point first was a grave insult to the pizza gods, who would then curse your next 5 pizzas with toppings that would slide off the moment you looked at them. 28. If you stopped the microwave before the timer finished, you were required to formally apologize to it. You had to look at the little screen and say, "I'm sorry for interrupting your work," because failing to do so would put the microwave into a passive-aggressive cycle, where it would only heat the edges of your food for the next 24 hours. 29. Before leaving the house, you had to get formal permission from the family dog. This involved looking him dead in the eyes and asking, "Sir Fluffington, guardian of the threshold, may I have your leave to depart?" If he wagged his tail, you were free to go. If he barked, you had to wait 5 minutes and try again. He was the head of security. 30. Any guest entering the home for the first time had to perform the threshold ritual. Tap the top of the door frame 3 times to shake off any bad juju from the outside world. A friend forgot once, and the Wi-Fi went out for the rest of the night. The family still blames his uncleansed aura. 31. All pillows on every bed had to be positioned facing magnetic north before you could sleep. This was to align your brainwaves with the Earth's magnetic field, allowing for clearer dream downloads. A south-facing pillow would supposedly result in nothing but nightmares about doing your taxes and finding expired milk in the fridge. 32. You were never, ever allowed to talk about the weather indoors. It was seen as arrogantly tempting fate and directly challenging the sky gods. Complaining about rain would guarantee a flood. Praising a sunny day would summon a plague of locusts. It was a meteorological minefield. What's one topic that, if you could, you'd make forbidden in your house? Unleash the chaos in the comments. 33. When washing dishes, you could not put forks and spoons in the same section of the dishwasher's cutlery basket. This would create utensil tension and lead to a silent metallic feud that would make your food taste slightly of betrayal. They had to be segregated for their own emotional well-being. 34. You were not allowed to hum in the shower. Whistling summoned demons, but humming supposedly attracted sad, lonely water sprites who would then get attached to you and lower the house's water pressure for a week out of sheer clinginess. A cheerful hum could lead to a very disappointing rinse cycle. 35. Taking the last of anything, the last cookie, the last glass of milk, the last slice of bread, without performing a ceremony of gratitude, was a high crime. This involved holding the item, thanking it for its service, and promising to replace it within 24 hours. It was like a tiny, solemn funeral for a bag of chips. 36. On Christmas, every single ornament on the tree had to be hung with the hook facing the front door. This was to ensure they were properly greeting the Christmas spirit when it arrived. An ornament facing a wall was considered incredibly rude, and the family believed it would result in getting socks and underwear from Santa. 37. When driving, no one in the car was allowed to use the word lost. Uttering it would cause the car's GPS to have a technological anxiety attack and deliberately send you down the most confusing and traffic-filled route possible. Instead, you had to say you were engaging in spontaneous vehicular exploration. 38. It was forbidden to kill a spider found inside the house. Instead, you had to capture it and release it outside while saying, "Go tell your friends the people here are kind." This was part of a long-term diplomatic strategy to prevent a future spider uprising, which the grandfather was apparently convinced was imminent. 39. If you had a bad dream, you had to verbally tell it to a glass of water upon waking up. Then, you had to pour that water down the kitchen sink to drain the nightmare away. If you forgot, the nightmare would supposedly go stale in your head and replay on a loop for the rest of the day. 40. All of the clocks in the house were intentionally set exactly 3 minutes fast. Not 2, not 5, 3. When a guest asked why, the mother would lean in conspiratorially and whisper, "It's to give us a head start on destiny." And if you think that's where the madness ends, you are so wrong. 41. Taking out the trash after sunset was strictly forbidden. It wasn't about safety, it was about spiritual economics. The family believed you were throwing away the day's good luck before it had a chance to settle. This would leave the house in a luck vacuum, inviting all the neighborhood's bad fortune to rush in and fill the void. 42. You could never put an odd number of ice cubes in a drink. 3 ice cubes? Unbalanced. 5? Pure chaos. The father claimed it created a negative energy frequency in the beverage, making it taste of mild, unspecific disappointment, regardless of what it was. Every drink had to be energetically symmetrical. 43. The bed had to be made the exact second you got out of it. An unmade bed was seen as a formal written invitation for sorrow weasels to come and nap in your sheets. These invisible creatures would then leave behind a faint residue of existential dread that would cling to you all day. 44. The phone had to ring exactly 3 times before anyone could answer it. The first ring was to alert the house spirits. The second was for them to listen in on who was calling. And only on the third ring were you, a mere mortal, permitted to join the conversation. It was a supernatural conference call every single time. 45. Leaving the refrigerator door open for more than 5 seconds was an emotional crime. Not because of the electricity bill, but because it hurt the refrigerator's feelings. A sad refrigerator would retaliate by making all your produce wilt slightly faster and hiding your favorite leftovers at the very back, behind the questionable jar of olives. 46. The number 4 was treated like a verbal biohazard. It was never spoken aloud. If you needed to reference it, you had to call it the number after 3. They believed the sound itself was a tiny black hole that sucked the joy out of a room. They even had their address legally changed from 44 Maple Street to the house after 43. 47. Walking backwards was completely banned, indoors or out. The logic? You were literally retracing your steps on the timeline and could accidentally unlive a good memory. Grandma once walked backwards out of the kitchen and permanently forgot her award-winning chili recipe. What's the most ridiculous, scientific reason your family ever gave for a rule? I desperately need to hear these in the comments. 48. The house broom had to be stored bristles up. Storing it bristles down would sweep all the family's prosperity right out the door. If someone found it the wrong way, they had to perform a prosperity reversal ritual, which involved sweeping clockwise in a tiny circle to humbly ask the good fortune to come back. 49. You had to cover your mouth when you yawned, not out of politeness, but to prevent opportunity gnomes from seeing your uvula. Apparently, they believe the uvula is a portal to your deepest ambitions and will climb into your mouth while you sleep to steal your life goals. It's a surprisingly detailed heist plan. 50. Getting toast crumbs in the main stick of butter was an act of profound disrespect to the butter spirit. This benevolent dairy entity would become offended and curse the butter, making it completely unspreadable for a week. You'd be left tearing your bread apart with a rock-hard, vengeful stick of unsalted fury. 51. The family was forbidden from ever owning a green car. The matriarch insisted that green was the Earth's signature color, and to put it on a gas-guzzling machine was the highest form of hypocrisy. Nature would then retaliate by plaguing the car with an unnatural amount of bird droppings and flat tires. 52. You could never ever be the first person to leave a party. The first person to depart supposedly rips the soul out of the gathering, taking all the fun with them and leaving everyone else in a vortex of awkward silence. This led to a nightly departure standoff, where everyone was exhausted but too terrified to make the first move. 53. The television had to be turned off during all meals, not for family bonding, but because the characters on the screen were spying on you and would silently judge your eating habits and dinner conversation. The father was convinced the cast of his favorite sitcom thought he was a slob. 54. At night, all closet doors had to be completely shut. An open closet wasn't a portal for monsters. It was a stage for misbehaving shadows. The family believed the shadows would use the space to put on silent, terrible plays that would dramatize and mock your failures from the day. 55. Mail could not be brought directly into the house. It had to sit on the porch for a mandatory 10-minute negativity quarantine to let the bad vibes from bills and junk mail dissipate before crossing the threshold. And you thought your junk mail was the biggest problem. 56. You could never step on the same floor crack twice in one day. Doing so would awaken the repetition imps, tiny, invisible bureaucrats of fate who would then force you to redo one random task you completed that day. You could spend 10 minutes doing dishes only to find them mysteriously dirty again, all because you weren't watching your step. 57. All food on your plate had to be arranged by color in perfect Roy-Give rainbow order. This wasn't for aesthetics, it was to appease the flavor spectrums, ethereal beings that govern taste. If your peas touched your corn out of sequence, Both would be cursed to taste like wet cardboard. 58. When leaving a voicemail, you were required to end the message by saying "over and out," as if you were in a spy movie. If you didn't, the family believed the message goblins would intercept the recording and subtly change key words, turning "I love you" into "I loathe you." What's a bizarre rule you would secretly love to enforce on your family? Let the tyranny begin in the comments. 59. Dusting had to be done in complete and utter silence. The family believed that household dust was made of the microscopic, crystallized memories of everything that had happened in the house. A loud noise during dusting could shatter a good memory, causing everyone to vaguely forget why they were happy that day. 60. Before putting dirty clothes in the hamper, you had to individually thank each item for its service. "Thank you, shirt, for covering my torso." Failing to show gratitude would anger the fabric sprites, who would then retaliate by stealing one of your socks in the wash as a lesson in humility. 61. This family had an irrational fear of balloons. A single floating balloon indoors was considered an unmoored thought, which would absorb the most brilliant idea anyone in the house had that day, and then simply float away with it. Your million-dollar idea could be stolen by a piece of latex. What's the most irrational fear you've ever witnessed? I bet it can't top this. 62. The main staircase in the house had a favorite step, the seventh one. Everyone was required to give it a little extra love by tapping it twice as they passed. Ignoring the favorite step would make the entire staircase sulky, and it would mysteriously become 10% creakier and more treacherous for the rest of the day. 63. You were forbidden from finishing someone else's sentence. It wasn't about being rude, it was about spiritual theft. Doing so would steal the end of their thought, leaving that person with a permanent nagging feeling that they'd forgotten something critically important for the rest of their lives. 64. No one was ever allowed to bring a rock or pebble inside from the outdoors. Each stone had its own geological guardian attached to it, and bringing one inside was considered kidnapping. In retaliation, the guardian would cause all the drains in the house to clog with mysterious mineral deposits. Which of these families do you think would be the least likely to survive a simple camping trip? Place your bets. 65. The TV volume could only be set on an even number or a multiple of 5. A volume of 13 or 27 would supposedly disrupt the harmonic resonance of the pixels, causing all the actors on screen to look subtly evil and untrustworthy. 66. Brushing your teeth had to be a perfectly timed 2-minute affair, not for dental hygiene, but to outsmart the cavity gremlins. This was the exact amount of time required to bore them into leaving your mouth to find a more interesting host. Any shorter, and they'd stay out of pure curiosity. 67. This family believed yawns were contagious because a literal boredom demon was jumping from person to person. The only way to stop the chain was for the next person in line to immediately tell a terrible joke, as these demons were violently allergic to bad puns. Okay, be honest. Has a rule on this list made you check if your own family is secretly this weird? No judgment here. 68. You could never fold a dollar bill directly through the president's face. This was an act of financial treason that would anger the ghost of that president, who would then give you terrible financial advice in your dreams, like investing your life savings in a company that sells designer pet rocks. 69. All shadows at noon were considered neutral, but as the sun set, they became mischievous. You were forbidden from letting your shadow touch another family member's, or you would swap anxieties for the rest of the evening. It was a high-stakes game of shadow tag you didn't want to lose. 70. Before leaving for a vacation, one person had to sit down and have a formal conversation with the house itself, explaining where they were going and when they'd be back. Forgetting this would give the house abandonment issues, causing it to manifest its sadness by making one random, expensive appliance break down the day they returned. 71. The little red flag on the mailbox had to be put down every single night without fail. It wasn't for the mail carrier, it was for the flag itself. The family believed the flag was a loyal sentinel that would get emotionally and physically exhausted if left on duty overnight, and a tired flag would start aggressively rejecting important mail out of sheer burnout. 72. Laughing too loudly for too long was discouraged. It wasn't about being disruptive. They believed that loud, sustained laughter attracted acoustic parasites, invisible sound-based creatures that would latch onto the joyful noise, feed on it, and leave you with a strange, inexplicable feeling of post-laugh melancholy. 73. You were forbidden from watering houseplants with cold water directly from the tap. It had to be room temperature. Why? Cold water would give the plants a botanical brain freeze, shocking their delicate root consciousness. In retaliation, the plant would become passive-aggressive and refuse to flower for the entire season. What's the most high-maintenance thing in your house? Plant, pet, or person? Let's hear it. 74. The junk drawer in the kitchen was never, ever to be completely cleaned out. That drawer wasn't just a mess, it was the designated chaos anchor for the entire household. It absorbed all the minor bad luck and negative energy. To empty it would be to unleash a year's worth of concentrated misfortune all at once. A messy drawer was their first line of supernatural defense. 75. Windows could only be cleaned on a cloudy day. Washing them in direct sunlight was seen as an act of hubris, an arrogant attempt to outshine the sun. The sun, being a petty celestial body, would then personally exact revenge by baking new, impossible-to-remove smudges onto the glass within the hour. 76. The loops on your tied sneaker laces had to be perfectly symmetrical. Uneven loops would create a subtle ambulatory imbalance that would cause you to physically and metaphorically drift to one side all day, leading to a series of increasingly poor life choices. Okay, I have to ask, which rule on this list so far is actually kind of brilliant in a weird way? I need to know if I'm the only one. 77. You were not allowed to say the words, "I need coffee." This phrasing showed desperation and gave power to the caffeine fiends, tiny, mischievous energy vampires that fed on your dependency. You had to approach it with confidence, stating, "I would enjoy some coffee," thereby negotiating with the beverage from a position of power. 78. It was forbidden to make a sad or angry face while looking in a mirror. The family believed that mirrors had emotional memory and would absorb a fraction of that negativity. For the rest of the day, that mirror would project a subtle, depressing aura back at you every time you walked past, creating a vicious feedback loop of your own bad mood. 79. You were allowed to take the stairs 2 at a time going up, but never going down. This was considered cheating gravity, and it deeply offended the gravity warden, a tired, overworked entity who managed the laws of physics in your home. As punishment, he would make you trip over a completely flat surface later that day. Would you rather deal with the gravity warden or the repetition imps from earlier? Cast your vote. 80. During the day, all curtains and blinds had to be fully open. Closed curtains didn't just block the view, they suffocated the daylight. This trapped light would grow stale and grumpy, and when you finally released it in the evening, it would spread a wave of unexplainable irritability throughout the entire house. 81. The red silicone spatula was for sweet foods only. Using it for anything savory, like onions or garlic, would traumatize its flavor memory. Once traumatized, it would hold a grudge and subtly impart a ghostly, phantom taste of garlic into every batch of chocolate chip cookies you made for the next 6 months. 82. After someone rang the doorbell, you had to count to 5 before opening the door. This wasn't for safety, it was to give the sound waves time to settle. Opening the door too quickly would shatter the chime's echo, leaving a sonic ghost that would ring faintly in your ears for the rest of the evening. 83. Salt and pepper were condiment soulmates and had to be passed together at the dinner table, always. Separating them even for a moment was believed to cause them both to suffer from acute existential loneliness, which would instantly neutralize their flavor. The result wasn't bland food. It was food that tasted of deep, profound sadness. On a scale of 1 to calling a therapist, how weird is your own family? Be honest. 84. All leftover containers in the fridge had to be labeled with not just the contents and date, but also a single word describing the emotional state of the meal. You'd find containers labeled joyful chili, pensive pot roast, or slightly disappointed casserole. Eating leftovers that didn't match your mood was considered emotionally reckless. 85. The last person to go to bed had the most important job. They had to stand in the quiet living room and whisper, "Good night, house." This was to officially let the house know that its shift was over and it could relax its foundations. If everyone forgot, the house would stay tense all night, groaning and creaking with anxiety until sunrise. 86. Dog-earing the page of a book was considered a violent assault. It wasn't just damaging the paper, you were breaking the spine of the story's soul. The family believed a mistreated book would get its revenge by magically making you misread crucial plot points, ensuring you would never, ever understand the ending. 87. You had to verbally compliment the printer before sending it a job. A simple, "You're doing great today" was sufficient. This was to appease its temperamental mechanical spirit. If you didn't, it would take your silent disrespect as a challenge and intentionally create the most catastrophic paper jam imaginable out of pure, calculated spite. 88. Leftover containers could not be stacked in the fridge if they contained different types of food. This would create spiritual flavor contamination. The ghost of yesterday's chicken would begin to haunt the soul of today's spaghetti, resulting in a meal that tasted vaguely of confusion and interculinary conflict. 89. If you accidentally put on a shirt inside out, you had to keep it that way for the rest of the day. Taking it off to fix it was seen as rejecting the day's predetermined destiny. You were just supposed to own your new, slightly lumpy fate. Which rule on this list would you secretly enforce on your friends just for chaos? I need your evilest ideas in the comments. 90. Your reflection in a puddle was considered a weaker, more emotionally fragile version of your soul. Stepping on it was a grave act of self-disrespect. Your actual soul would then punish you for this betrayal by plaguing you with a full day of cripplingly low self-esteem and a sudden inability to make eye contact. 91. Clinking your teeth with a fork while eating was forbidden. This sound was a high-frequency distress signal to the enamel gnomes, tiny benevolent guardians who lived in your mouth and polished your teeth. The noise was deeply offensive to them, and they would immediately go on strike, making your teeth painfully sensitive for the next hour. 92. House keys were never allowed to be placed on the dinner table. They were seen as tiny metal sponges that absorbed all the stress and anxiety of the outside world. Placing them where you eat would contaminate your food with the lingering existential dread of traffic jams and annoying coworkers. 93. When playing any board game, you were forbidden from celebrating a victory too enthusiastically. A loud "I win" would awaken the spirit of poor sportsmanship, an ancient, petty entity that would then curse you to lose every single game of chance you played, from Monopoly to a coin toss, for the next full month. Okay, real talk. Which of these families would you rather spend a holiday with? Place your bets. 94. All houseplants had to be given a quarter turn clockwise every single Friday. This was to prevent them from getting geographically bored and falling into a deep, leafy depression. A bored plant, they claimed, would start passive-aggressively dropping its leaves just to spite you. 95. The word "soon" was considered a curse. It was too vague for these schedule sprites who managed the household's flow of time. Using it would cause them to have a collective meltdown, ensuring that whatever you were referring to would happen at the most inconvenient moment possible, whether it was in 5 minutes or 5 months. 96. You were forbidden from thinking about elephants after 9 p.m. The family was convinced that late-night elephant thoughts were so metaphysically heavy they would physically weigh down your dreams, causing you to wake up feeling as though you'd spent the entire night doing manual labor in your sleep. 97. The family had a designated scapegoat object, a slightly chipped ceramic frog kept on the mantelpiece. Whenever anything went wrong, a burnt meal, a failed test, a bad day at work, every family member had to go to the frog and verbally blame it for the problem. This transferred the bad karma, leaving the frog to bear the weight of all their failures. 98. Before leaving for a trip, you had to pour a tiny glass of water and leave it on the kitchen counter. This was an offering for the thirst ghosts, who would otherwise get lonely and drink all the water from the toilet bowls while you were gone. It was a simple solution to a deeply weird, imaginary problem. 99. When a light bulb burned out, you couldn't just throw it away. You had to put it back in its original packaging and bury it in the backyard. This was a funeral for the light, a sign of respect for its long service. They believed it allowed the bulb's luminous spirit to be peacefully reincarnated into a firefly. Which rule officially broke your brain? I think this one was it for me. 100. Every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. sharp, the family would conduct a mandatory weekly vibe check. This involved everyone sitting in a circle, closing their eyes, and humming the same note in unison for 60 seconds. If the harmony was off, it meant someone was holding a secret grudge, and they'd have to keep doing it until the house frequency was reset. 101. And the final, most important rule of all, you were never, ever allowed to ask why about any of the other rules. Questioning the logic was the only unforgivable sin. It would supposedly invite the logic demon into the house, a terrifying entity that would unravel the very fabric of their carefully constructed reality, forcing them all to live in the cold, boring world of common sense. That's 101 rules straight out of a family asylum. Now your turn. If you had to invent one rule guaranteed to ruin Christmas dinner in under 5 minutes, what would it be? Don't hold back. I want chaos in the comments. And if you're bold enough to drop it, smash like and subscribe before your relatives ban YouTube in the house.